Well, what's this pile of detritus here today? This is a Fay&Scott pattern maker's lathe. What does that mean? Well, it just means it's a very robust and very high quality woodworking lathe. In the case of Fay&Scott, they actually advertised this thing as a pattern maker's lathe, and I'll show you why in a minute. It's extremely complete. It comes with the countershaft hangers, the countershaft with tight and loose pulleys, the shifting fork arm, the legs, of course, headstock. This thing is the outboard turning stand. So you have the headstock of the lathe and the bed would go along like this. You can also turn things from that flange on the far end of the headstock. So theoretically, you can turn something with a radius of the spindle to the floor. So you can turn massive bowls or huge big casting patterns, whatever you need. So we'll look at the headstock. 4 speeds, bronze boxes or bronze bearings with end play adjusting collars there. I haven't had this thing off yet with the screw, but there should be a, well, there's a threaded part here, and then there's a Morse taper 2 hole inside. Behind it we have the very long hand tool rest, and then there's a little short one over there that can go into the same base. Behind that we have the tailstock, and I must point out with this machine that it has been cared for extremely well. You can see there's almost no slop when I actuate that. This is a Morse taper 2 tailstock. There's almost no slop in anything, so it's been taken care of very well. Yes, there's some surface rust, and the blue paint is a little bit funny in some places. All the screws are in great shape. Even this handle, I can't feel any slop in that bushing. Very elegant, must say. Compliments to the chef, because this thing was made with very high quality in mind. We have an inspector approaching. Every piece of casting, everything that's machined is very ornamental in its manner. Even these pointed handles everywhere. Nothing's been broken and rebrazed or rewelded. It's all in fine, great shape. Even little handles like this. It hasn't been broken. It's been cared for and maintained very, very well. So the only thing that's not on this big pile is the bed. So I'll show you that here. Going into the shed, line shaft pieces everywhere. There's the bed, 6-foot bed. It's Martyr Fay&Scott, made in Dexter, Maine. And it was sold by the Boston store of the Niles Tool Works in Boston, machine number 111. Niles is a name that goes way, way back in machinery design and manufacture. So the goal today is to get this over to the other barn and reassemble it where it can be used, where there's space to use it, by the duplicating lathe, and then set it up to go. So the story of this lathe is kind of interesting. It came from a very generous follower, subscriber, who offered to drive it multiple hours up here to bring it to me so that it wouldn't go to the scrap. Very generous guy, asked that no information be divulged, so that's all well and good, but I'd like to thank him again for that very generous thought of bringing this here. So let's work on getting it together. So here's the lathe all together in the barn. Everything put back together, and I gave it a quick oiling when I assembled it. On the floor here's the countershaft, and I have a hardwood, about 1-inch hardwood board that I'll mount it to, and then the whole thing goes to the ceiling. So I'll just mock up the countershaft, put both hangers on, mark the holes, drill them, and then figure out exactly how to line this up. So I'll probably also mark the edge of the pulley so that I can gauge this edge of the pulley up and then figure out its alignment. And there are 2 logs that go crossways. They're not square, so that'll take some shimming to mount the countershaft too. We're in the same little room in the barn where the duplicating lathe is. It's right here. So this is now the lathe room. So now if I take a straight edge against the edge of this countershaft pulley and put a mark like you can see right down there, that should, once this whole thing is flipped around and on the ceiling, align with the same straight edge being put against this face of the pulley. Because you have a collar on one end, and then, so that's how I'll line this up. Sitting where it is right now, the mark is about here, and that's in line with the pulley. The problem now is that if we look up, that beam is going to let that board hang way out over there, and this beam is going to just about overlap with these holes, and that's no good. So I'll have to mount it just like this, enough to clear those holes, drill some holes and lag screw, and move the lathe over, which I wasn't hoping to, I was hoping not to do because there's a doorway here. And I need to bring the pattern lathe in and out sometimes with the duplicating lathe. Anyway, we'll make do. I'll mount the countershaft, and worst case, we'll just shimmy this thing to align it with the countershaft. So to make these things level, and this is just level by eye, there's nothing too fancy business here. I put one shim in here already. I have this old hatchet from my books. This is considered a Lathe's hatchet, very similar to a shingling hatchet. Anyway, it's nice, narrow, thin blade for splitting these things. Does a pretty good job. So a few of these, I'll be able to stack them on top of each other and build up this side in between the two bolts. And that'll bring it down. So I don't think I'll need too much more than this. Probably one double stacked like this, and these are thicker shingles too. These are the ones that we sawed when we were experimenting on the shingle mill. They're a little bit thicker, so that's a good 1/2 inch in the middle, maybe a bit more. And I'll probably add one more wedge up there to bring it to where it should be pretty well level. And then counter shaft hangers will go up, and then I'll finesse a way to put the shaft up there. So, board is up with the 4 bolts. I made a decision, because of how far over this thing has to hang so that everything lines up right. This is going to be a little bit sketchy, although it is hardwood, a good solid, and the beams above are going to hold it all right, because those are big legs. I'd still rather put a hole right through here and go all the way through the ceiling, which in this case goes in the hem out of the old barn, and I believe there's 2 layers of inch planks. So I've got this big honker here, and just run it on slow, and this is a brand new drill bit, and it's slightly bent right out of the package. Nice. Anyway, probably right about there, right above the comb pulley. It'll feel a little bit less precarious working right here with this whole thing spinning. In addition, you have a little bit of tension for the flat belt to run the machine. So also, if I tighten this, the screw bolt thing that comes through more, I'll be able to pull up this end and further level this plank out a little bit. Even though I've shimmed it, it's still a bit. Well, there happened to be an old power cord busted frayed off of something hanging on the wall, which is a perfect opportunity to show you my tactic of hanging shafting while alone. Yes, you safety people better start shaking and trembling in your boots. This is going to be some hardcore engineering right here. Go ahead and do an old loop-de-loop of some sort. Come on now. Get a little bit high. Nice. Now these bearings are very convenient, and the bearings themselves rock. So as long as I'm lined up, they can rock up and down pretty easily. Oh, only got one there. Oh. There we go. Look at that. Nice and stable. So while this is sitting here, I'll just shimmy those straps, the wires over a little bit, and that'll let me slide this bearing on and then lift it the final distance onto those bolts. Geez. The lathe is in a bit of a tough spot for such business. Right here. Well, the countershaft is up. It has a notion of finalization. I'll go ahead and put up the shifter. There it is. Even though I don't plan on using it right now, the idea for the moment is to put an electric motor back on this beam and run it over to this guy, because I have some projects coming up with the lathe. Okay, here's the situation. Shaft is up, and I've lined up the edge of this flange with the same one on the lathe. I repositioned it a little bit towards this door so that everything will line up and make sense with the mounting. Power source is a rando old electric motor that I had, and I took a notion to weld an old hinge right to the thing, and that hinge can pivot where it's mounted to use the weight of the motor to tension the belt. And the weight of the motor, just from practice, isn't quite that strong. It still slips. So what I've decided to do is get, where is it? Here. Now this, getting really janky here. There's a lot more janky elements than I normally partake in given projects, but anyway, this is what's left of an old weight from a linotype lead type casting machine. And it says some stuff on it. I can't read it. Doesn't have a date. I don't know. Anyway, put an S-hook in it, and it can very nicely hang in the edge in the last screw hole of that hinge, which will give a little bit of extra tension. That's about 5 additional pounds, and that gives us good belt tension without holding it too solidly. I can still pinch it there, and that should be all right. So if a disaster occurs, this belt will still fly off onto the shaft and quit giving it power. There is no belt here yet on that side, so that's what we'll do next. I have a roll of 2-inch, quite new, what is this? 3 or 4 ply 2-inch belting. So we'll run that through there and lace it up and try the thing out. So I just wrapped the belt around, measured it with a pencil mark, and then laced it on the clipper lacer. And gotta feel the smooth side. I'll just start it on the small ends. We'll roll it on, see how far off it is. I always cut shorter, about 1/4 to 1/2 inch, depending on the length. So we'll see. Oh yeah, that's plenty tight. Wow, that's plenty tight. So this will be the slowest speed under power. Plenty tight. Let's see how it rolls. So, actually it's running backwards right now. Which is weird. Guess I better fix that. Well, last time I made any significant progress on this pattern maker's lathe was in August. And I pulled a bit of a goof. Anyway, most of the effort's been put on the duplicating lathe, which is in the same room here, in the sledgehammer handle. So this thing's going quite well right now. But here's the goof that I pulled. So I look at this thing. The headstock has a nice tapered hole. The tailstock has a nice tapered hole. Looks kind of like Morse taper too. I didn't think to test it at the time because everything's Morse taper, right? Well, this is a Morse taper 2 bit. And it goes all the way in. It actually kind of seats, but it goes well beyond where it should. Well beyond where it should. So before even bothering to test that, I went, everything's Morse taper 2. Went on to Busy Bee, the Canadian tool supplier website, and went ahead and got a driving spur, Morse taper 2, and of course the hole's too small for Morse taper 3, so I do some digging, and I find a Keith Rucker video, and it says this is a Jarno taper, and I go, oof, okay. Well, okay, damn. So I waited a month to get these parts. And they very generously, they came, they're good parts, but they very generously sent a 10% off discount on walkers and adult diapers. So I'm not sure that their, what do you call it, their demographic is necessarily my age. But anyway, that didn't work. And the whole point of getting the driving spur and the live center for the far side, or the revolving dead center, I guess, was to do a demonstration. So I'd really like to actually turn custom Jarno tapers. I know Keith has one of these lathes as well, and he changed that to a Morse taper, which is possible. You can just machine that out up to the next larger Morse taper size. But I'm a bit of a purist in that department, so I'm going to keep that for now and hopefully do some taper turning of a Jarno spur. In the meantime, to get this demonstrated for you fine folks watching this, I'm going to put back on this driving screw flange system, which is threaded onto the headstock. And we're going to try it this way, and something shorter because there's no support from the tail. So I'm going to turn old-fashioned rosettes. Old-fashioned rosettes that were used where a miter joint could have been used, where two pieces of moldings go together. They put a rosette in the corner. So that's what we'll do. And to do that, we don't really need this combination rest system. So I'll just pop this tool holder off right out of there, just to get it out of the way so I don't whack myself. And what we'll do is slide this whole contraption back, and I'll pick up the hand steady rest, which is just held very simply with a little cross situation. So pretty straightforward. I can just pick this thing up and position it down in here on the other side, and then tighten that in place with these little this little guy under here, and there's a nut and a jam nut that'll hold that in place. We can slide this to where we need, which will be perpendicular, and adjust the height and whatnot. Here's what I was speaking of with respect to rosettes. You can see it's a block about 1 inch thick by 5 inch square in this one's case. And it has a little dome in the middle, some ornamental, a little OG system going on there. And these were put in the corners of moldings, actually. Hey, here's a section of molding from the molding machine. I didn't quite finish it, but you can imagine that goes up there. And these were an alternative to miter joints, cutting 45, because things would shift eventually, and then that joint would open up and it would be an obvious flaw. And if you were to put these, part of the theory is this little overhang, the shadow here, will much help to hide a gap that may or may not open up. But regardless of that, they're lovely little contraptions. They're nice. They're just ornamental, nice additions. And if you look on the back of this one, there is kind of a bit of a hole in the center. So this is probably the same way that this was made. So I have prepared 2 squares of pine, which are about 3/4 thick. This is a 2-inch screw protruding from this thingamajig. So I'll put these on first, and that'll leave 3/4, 1.5, leave a 1/2 inch of engagement for this other unused block of pine. So I've just made a cross, an X from corner to corner, and pilot drilled a tiny little hole in the center, and that will engage in the screw. So this lathe very nicely came with a smaller tool rest, which is perfect for this, so I don't wang myself in the gut there with this great big nice long one. So I'll pop that out, put that one in. This one can just hang out over here. And I also had a chance to make a nice little tool rack for all of those guys on the wall. So this. Just put these 2 on here. All the way to the end. That's leaving about a bit less than a 1/2 inch protrusion. And this is the one that we'll make the rosette on, and I'll just start it on there like so. And then the tool rest, we'll put her up a little bit, lock it in place. And last step before firing up is oil. There's a couple beautiful little brass oil cups for the brass or bronze bearing boxes on the headstock spindle, and the countershaft is a steel shaft or an iron shaft in cast iron boxes. They're just there's no babbitt in them, so they take oil, and they have these lovely little cast iron drip cups that catch the run out, so it doesn't make too big of a mess. So hit all those points, and we'll be good to fire up. Whoop. Pardon the chattering, that's just the motor bracket is a little bit vibrating. So, here's the original, and I will very roughly mark out, well, that's our center, and we'll make a bit of a dome, and a little step, and then kind of that OG shape, with the outside being about a 1/2 inch in from the edge, and see what we can do with that. Should remove all such things around the lathe. You know what, I'm pretty happy with that, but the surface is quite coarse. So, I'm going to up it in speed to the maximum. she can go. It's going to squeal a little bit at first, but it should give us a nicer finish. By no means a professional, not even dreaming of it quite yet, but I'd say that's a nice general shape. It feels when you're going that you're getting deeper than you are, but I'm sure that's only a 1/4 inch of the depth, and this one's quite deep. It is thicker, but it's quite deep, so I might play with that some more. I will play with that some more. But that worked all right. I'd say that's a great success, and this is a beautiful, very, very beautiful lathe. I'm quite proud of indeed. It obviously will deserve a full restoration someday, but for now it's extremely functional and nice. And hope you enjoyed, and see you next time.